Hi, y'all. Laure McCants, she, her, hers, founding member of the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, zooming to you from the banks of the beautiful Susquehanna River, mighty, muddy, crooked river of the Long Reach. My theater sits on the historic and traditional territory, the Haudenosaunee, the Susquehannock, the Munsee, the Shawnee, and the Lenape peoples. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're here to talk about collective artistic direction, ensemble work, collective artistic empowerment. I belong to a theater company that's been doing this for a long, long, long time. I have lots of stories to tell, but I'm not going to tell those stories unless you ask me. Um, we have some folks here who are starting on this journey of collective artistic empowerment. And I'm going to turn it over to them. The first people that we're going to talk to are the folks from the American Shakespeare Center. Hi, y'all.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
Doing well?
Good. You want to talk to us? Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm John Harrell. I'm an actor manager at the American Shakespeare Center in Stanton, Virginia, which is on the land of the Monacan people. I am one of 4 actor managers here. My pronouns are he, his.
My name is Kelly Burdick. I am currently the Director of Communications at the American Shakespeare Center, although all of our titles and roles are a bit in flux at the moment. And yeah, I'm part of a management team of 5 people representing different parts of the organization, working together to try to run smoothly. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about who we are and where we came from?
Sure. The company started in 1988 as a sort of college club almost. It was started by an English professor at James Madison University and one of his students. And it was, for its first decade and a half, it was essentially a touring operation, mostly on the East Coast, but a little bit on the West Coast and a little bit abroad. Then in 2001, we opened the company, I say we, I wasn't a member of it, then opened the Blackfriars Playhouse here in Stanton, Virginia. It's a recreation of Shakespeare's indoor playhouse. After we opened, a few years after we opened, and had a resident company in-house, we started performing under what we called an actor's renaissance model, which was about 3 or 4 months out of the year, we would have an acting company that would self-direct, essentially. The idea was to get back to a sort of original practices concept of Shakespeare's. It was also probably to save some money on directors, and what it started out as was a way. It was essentially a dead time in our calendar. We were January through March. People really weren't buying tickets. It was like, well, let's see what we can do that's a little bit different and change things up. And so we started doing this actor-led season, and it was quite successful. And we've continued to do it up through. We were in the middle of one of our Actors Renaissance seasons when the whole world shut down in 2020, so we have some history with actors kind of running the show, as it were, but only on the artistic side. In the last couple of years before the shutdown, we were beginning to move into an actor-manager model. I and my colleague Chris Johnston had both been sort of promoted to actor manager. I'm the actor manager for text, whatever that means exactly. What it really means is I've been in all of Shakespeare's plays, and so I kind of know who all the characters are. And Chris, my colleague, is the actor manager for music, and he's a musician. Music plays a huge part of the productions that we do here. So that's where we were as of 2018, 2019, moving into pandemic.
So on the admin side, prior to pandemic, we were operating under a very typical hierarchical structure. We had an artistic director and a managing director, and then a series of departmental directors with managers and associates and all of that under them. COVID shut us down like everyone else and contracted our staff a bit. And for some of that time period, that was temporary, and sometimes it was permanent. We had to lose some people permanently, some people chose to leave. And so we ended up with this rather small group of people working collaboratively by necessity. When you suddenly go from 25 people down to 4, trying to put out a virtual season, suddenly the title of director of development, which is what I was at that time, doesn't have meaning anymore. And I'm taking on marketing and some other things. And I think I held a camera for a while, and anything that needs to be done, everybody was kind of doing. So we built into this collaboration by necessity type of model. And it also was kind of a great equalizer because no one was an authority and no one was an expert on how to COVID. We learned how to COVID together. Then at the end, as we were closing out 2020, both members of our executive leadership team resigned within 6 months of each other, leaving us without that typical or that traditional hierarchy that we've had before. And we all found that we kind of enjoyed collaborating. We found the staff that was working found fulfillment under greater, with having greater agency. I think COVID also made us all stop and think about who we wanted to be and what we wanted out of life. And the idea of answering to someone in the way that we were before wasn't as appealing as it had been in the past. And so we went to the board to see if we wouldn't be able to restructure ourselves with a more collaborative model. Meanwhile, we had no artistic plan for 2021 because we hadn't made one before because the timeline for planning had shifted so much. And so we thought, let's give it a shot. And so we turned to our actor managers and handed over artistic planning to a group of actors.
Yeah, so we out of necessity, we did, because we already knew how to do plays without directors, we did our Christmas season show, our Christmas Carol, with an actor-led model. There were 4 of us around, and we hired a couple of other people to flesh out the cast, and then we just staged and essentially shot in one performance of our Christmas Carol and streamed it. What's that? Clopening, right. We had our clopening, closing and opening, and then we went. The 4 of us who had taken on the role of actor managers then went into January. The theater was dark. We were on furlough like most people, and we sort of found our way back into a little bit of part-time work to try to plan some kind of season for 2021. And so the 4 of us with Kelly and with the input, some of the board, but mostly not, mostly the 5 of us together, planned out what we thought would be a useful summer and fall season. We already had a plan to stage a new play that was sort of halfway in the works. So we've been trying to continue to plan for that. And then we had to figure out what Shakespeare or non-Shakespeare plays we wanted to stage for 2021. And we planned it out. The 5 of us put it together, and we made a calendar, and we had templates from past years, and we have hired actors, and we've brought a company together, and we've quarantined, and we've rehearsed, and we opened our Macbeth on, what day was that? On Saturday. Just this last Saturday, and we started rehearsals for Henry V today. So that's been our year to date.
Yeah. So it went pretty well, I mean, it had its bumps, but what doesn't? And we took that to the board as kind of evidence as this can work. You don't, the idea, I think the idea with the company in transition of bringing new leadership in at the top felt like something we didn't want to do. And so we went to the board and we said, hey, look, it works. We've got a season, and have started a series of reorganization conversations with them to get their input and buy-in. And so what we've come up with, which is still a rough draft, actually the board is meeting tomorrow to have another conversation about it, and we're hoping by the end of this month to have things solidified.
It's good to know.
Yeah, I just learned that today. And so what we end up with is, instead of a model that has people at the top that go down, we have a new model that has mission at the center, and it has different kind of circles of the company coming out from the central mission. And those individual circles can be organized in the way that makes most sense for them. So whereas a group of actor managers is a even group that's like level with each other, in a finance department, you might need to have a bookkeeper that reports to a director of finance. So there's some places where some hierarchy is necessary and some places where it's not. So this model allows for each of those kind of areas to self-organize the way that they need to be organized. Then each of those groups has a representative that comes to kind of a center core that becomes the kind of managing group. And it's not a dictatorship, that group decides everything and then it's in collaboration with their own groups, coming back for collaboration in the middle. So by the time a decision is made, you have reached consensus. There are finer details that need to be worked out, like who reports to the board, where does accountability fall in, who's going to manage the budget, and things like that. But overall, it feels like it's moving in the direction that in some ways we've kind of been hurtling towards since the Actors Renaissance seasons began 16 years ago. So that's where we are.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. Any other challenges you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, we've gone from one period where it wasn't entirely clear who here could sign a contract to now having, we've restaffed at least our acting company. We've got some design workers, and we've got, we're trying to see what we need and also, I mean, there are bumps and hitches in anything like this, just from basic decision making to, artistic, butting of heads happens from time to time. So, there's still speed bumps that we're trying to work through, but so far so good.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. Bravo, brava. Best wishes to you as you encounter those speed bumps, as you will forever. There will be time for questions from everyone after the other theater, the Wilma, makes their presentation about their next chapter. James, Morgan, hello. Greetings,
hello.
Pennsylvania
Hi.
theaters, theater folks. What's going on? Tell us what's happening with y'all.
Sure. Well, my name is James Ijames. Like Laurie said, I am with the Wilma Theater. I'm a part of the artistic cohort. There are four of us. Sorry, I'm thinking about our managing director, who's also very much a part of our unit there. My pronouns are he, him, and I am zooming from the unceded land of the Lenni Lenape, currently known as Villanova, Pennsylvania. Morgan, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Morgan Green. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also one of the co-artistic directors at the Wilma. I'm in Brooklyn right now, which is Munsee Lenape land, where I am.
So we're going to break this up. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Wilma's history, and then Morgan's going to jump in, and then we're just going to bounce back and forth. The Wilma was founded in 1973 as a feminist theater collective in Philadelphia. And not long after that, Blanca Ziska and Yuri Ziska, who had recently immigrated from Eastern Europe, became a part of the collective and then took over leadership. So the organization has historically and continues to be really interested in collectivity, shared leadership, shared models of organizing a theater. The theater for many years has run in the way that a traditional regional theater does. In the early 2000s, Yuri Ziska took a step back from the organization, and Blanca Ziska became the lead artistic director and ran the theater by herself for many years. And about 8 years ago, she established an ensemble acting company called the Hot House Company, made up of actors that were and continue to be really versed in a collection of acting practices and rehearsal practices and process practices developed by Blanca under master teachers over many years. And maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, Blanca wanted to find a way to extend that model of collectivity back into the leadership, because it hadn't been there for a while. And that's where Morgan and I come into the picture. I've worked at the Wilma many years as an actor. They've produced plays of mine. I've directed there. So it feels like a really beautiful continuation to now be joining in leadership, there's a real cyclical investment in the artists that work there. Morgan, why don't you talk a little bit about how we got into this?
Yeah, I think something that was important to Blanca was when she was leading the theater with Yuri, they are both directors, so they directed constantly. And then when she wanted to invite some more directors into the leadership position with her, her idea was to continue this tradition of directors theater. So all four of us who are co-artistic directors are also director. So I'm coming from New York. I have a theater company here, and I was doing freelance directing. And she sort of brought me in to this cohort. I'm sort of the newest member, or the newest to the Wilma and to the Philly theater community. And I think that was quite intentional. I think she's sort of, in the four of us, we each have very different working histories and aesthetics and experiences. So she was kind of doing a casting call for co-artistic directors. So the four of us together, it's a really a fascinating kind of melding of minds. And as Laurie mentioned in the introduction, we're quite new to it. So the experiment that she called the next chapter was that the four of us would take turns being the lead co-artistic director while the other three provide support. And so we do collectively make decisions, but the structure as it stands right now is that there's one person who is the lead artistic director. So Blanca went first, and then it is currently Yuri Ernav's lead artistic director season, and we're moving into James's season, and then I'll be the fourth one. And what happens after that is TBD, big old TBD. But it's a cycle that she imagined, and she sort of invited us in and hoped that together we would find the rules. Essentially, we would figure out how to do it together, what we all care about collectively. And so that's very much what we've been in the midst of discovering. Meanwhile, pandemic crisis management sort of took the front seat in a major way. And probably brought us together more efficiently in some ways. So that's where we are right now.
Definitely. We've actually never been in these positions when there wasn't a pandemic. Like, we were announced, I think maybe 2 weeks went by, and then there was a shutdown. So our entire experience of being in the shared leadership model has been in little boxes like this. Until like later when we started to like try to produce things in the wild, which Morgan did really beautifully recently. I'm just so thrilled with the work. Yeah, so that's us. That's what we've been up to. We're playing a season for next year with the hopes of it all being in person, and trying to figure out together as a cohort how to return.
Okay, well, I have some practical questions, and I have some, I don't know, dreamland questions. But something that you just said, James, leads me to, and my dreamland questions are related to the art that we make. And you just praised something that Morgan did. Can you tell us a little bit about that? We're here for the art.
Yeah, well, I before when we were all together, we were trying to plan our season, which is the current season that we're in. And Morgan was in the coffee shop waiting for me, and she said, "Can I talk to you about your play, Fat Ham? I would like to direct it." And I said, "I would love that. I would love for you to work on it." And so we had a plan to do it, on the stage, and then the pandemic happened, and then Morgan came up with this brilliant idea to film it in these long takes, and it was sort of the theory of the collaborative leadership in practice, because any way that I could support her here on the on the ground, I tried to do that. while she was down in Virginia trying to figure out how to make this huge group of people make this piece of art. So it was this behemoth task. And so what we did back home is that we took up the slack. We made sure that Morgan didn't have to worry about things. It was a new experience. So there were things that fell through the cracks. There were things that we didn't do the way we should have done. We've learned a ton about what it takes to like make a movie. Hopefully we don't have to make movies anymore or for not much longer. But what resulted from that is this piece of art that I feel like captures the beauty of the play so so specifically. And I don't know, I'm really grateful for the experience to get to work with Morgan on that. And it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't have been in this shared model situation.
Yeah, I can answer. Lisa has a question in the chat. This season that we're currently in, Yuri, who's the lead, he had the idea that we would each direct, so that all four of us would choose something to direct. So that's why I found James's play in the Dropbox and fell in love with it and asked him if I could do it. And similarly, Yuri is directing a piece called Minor Character, which is an adaptation of Uncle Vanya that my theater company made. So I think that the crisscross and the intersection and sort of incestuousness of this season is just unique to this season. And then just practically speaking, the idea was that the lead artistic director would direct, and that's just part of their full-time salary job, but not necessarily that all four of us have to direct every season, because that would limit whose work gets to be seen at the theater. But it was sort of this like coming out season or introduction idea. That's why all of the back and forth crossing happened and working together.
Cool. John and Kelly, forgive me if I'm not remembering, but have you all produced something yet with this new structure?
We have, yeah, we are in mid-production. We run rotating repertory.
Right.
So we have one show open in an outdoor venue and are rehearsing another show for open in mid-June in our indoor venue.
Cool. Then I have a sort of an artistic question to ask you. I think those of us who aspire to honoring the collaborative nature of our art form have this idea that working collaboratively produces better art, better theater. What do you think? What are you seeing?
I think my experience of doing this now for 17 years or 16 years is that it certainly can produce better art. Just in terms of from the actor's renaissance point of view, just speaking as an actor, what we try to do, what we encourage people to do, is to bring each performer bring their best bet about what they think a scene is, what they think a character is, what they think a moment is, and bring it to the rehearsal room and bounce it off the best bet of the other person in the room, and have your ears open, have your eyes open, and listen and try to fit together. And when it works, it's fantastic. It sometimes doesn't work, and sometimes the wheels go flying off the thing, and that is part of, we've sort of trained our audiences to enjoy the spectacle of disaster, I think, as much as the spectacle of success. So we have some problems sometimes in the artistic success can be hit or miss, but I really think it's the thing that it gives me most as an actor is a real sense of ownership over the work that I'm doing. And I don't do a lot of contemporary plays. And I feel like people who are doing new plays are perhaps the first actor to play a part in a new play might have that sense of ownership. But when you're when you're in the 450th year of the production of Midsummer Night's Dream, it's hard to feel a sense of ownership about Oberon, except if you have been in control of really all of the artistic decisions that have gone into it. So I think we all of us as actors feel that, and I think you can see it on the stage. You can see that the actors feel a sense of ownership of what they're doing. They're never just executing someone else's motion.
Yeah, and I think observing the planning of it and getting to participate in a way that I don't normally, and for many people in the organization to get to participate in the planning, having at least been asked for your opinion will give you a greater, like you said, a greater buy-in. So if you're in the education department and you have to wait to hear what plays are handed down to you and then you're going to plan your programming, is very different than being part of the discussion to begin with.
Mhm.
And I think it has created, I have felt much more cohesion across the organization on being like on board about these plays and how we're doing them. Someone in the chat asked a question that I have too. So I would love, can I lift up someone else's question? Am I allowed to do that?
You are totally allowed.
Yeah, Erica asked, oh gosh, it's moving so fast. Erica asked, have you educated funders away from the narrative of a single visionary leader? This is one of the questions I have for you all at the Wilma, because I'm a fundraiser by design. So how are you managing that? How are you, because I would imagine it shifts from being transactional, even marketing and fundraising, into being much more institutional, that it's about getting people on board with the idea of a shared vision. I'm so curious how that's gone. And I think it's probably hard to answer because we're in COVID and who knows how it'll be next year. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that's going.
So my experience up to now, which has been relatively limited, is most of the funding conversations have been about the projects. So I had a funding conversation with a funder specifically about a piece that we were trying to produce and whether or not she wanted to sign on to be a producer on it. And so that felt really good to like have a conversation about the art and why the art is exciting and why she should invest in that. I would be lying if I said I didn't know who she was and she didn't know who I was and didn't like have an appreciation for me as a person. But I tried to be really intentional about talking about the Wilma and the art that we're making in this moment, as opposed to talking about or trying to create that sort of like friend relationship, which is I think what happens with like single leaders is that funders become really comfortable with a single person, and we want to have dinner with you. They want to have that like real close connection with that single person. And in some ways that gets sort of diffused in this model, I think, but I think it remains to be seen. I actually don't know that we've figured that out in terms of how this translates to working with funders in sort of one-on-one interactions. Morgan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I guess just to like back up a little bit, I do think Blanca did a lot of work with our board before they were convinced that this next chapter was a good idea. And I think it was coming out of a sense of urgency because the Wilma was quite dependent on subscriptions, which were dwindling. And so it was sort of like, there must be a change. Something has to change. And that was kind of the argument. And then she was able to, because she's a skilled fundraiser and communicator, she was able to bolster excitement around this 4-person leadership idea, which kind of like sits in the identity of the Wilma as a place where like sort of experimental things happen. And so but it took, I think, a very long time and a lot of convincing, just simply at the board level. But then totally echo what James said. It's, I think, still sort of TBD for us in terms of how those relationships continue and into the future, and how we continue to be able to afford it.
Right. Right. John and Kelly, how are things going with your board?
They're good. I mean, the board is also a little bit in transition as our leadership transition, our board transitioned a little bit. But the people who have remained are very much on board with the idea of a collective model. They also, I think I was thinking about the difference between having your artistic core being actors versus being directors. And our actors are by far the most visible people. You know, John is, I'm like surrounded by John posters right now. And and so when the idea that there's actually not, The idea that that this means that that the board will get to work with and interact with and hear from our actors has excited them. You know, they're the thing, because the individual plays are wonderful and people love coming to them, but it's a canon that rotates. And so, like John said, it's the 27th time we've done A Midsummer Night's Dream. So they're interested in, what is John going to do with it? And can I talk to him about it? So they've been excited. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I do think I mean, one of the things you get when you hire a really great artistic director is one person who's very good at hanging out with rich people and talking to them and making them laugh. And I would rather like die in a tiny little shell than go out and do that. And I have a feeling that that may be coming my way soon. So yeah, so I'm interested to hear too from the Wilma about what that's like. I've sort of always avoided those situations, but it does seem like that's part of fundraising, right? Is being able to tolerate a few drinks.
Well, it's also, I mean, I believe that it's everyone in the whole organization is on the development team, whether they like it or not, or know it or not. I believe that. And so since I got here, we've been diversifying the fundraising voice. So many people across the organization have a donor portfolio, not just the artistic director. So there are actors that I know I can send into a meeting with a donor and they're going to do great. I wouldn't send you into that meeting.
Thank you.
Like I would send you there, but I know that there are a few donors who you would find fascinating, that you would love to have a conversation with, and that's who I'd ask you to go meet. But I wouldn't deploy you to a cocktail party, you know, which is great because we have a lot of different types of actors and a lot of different types of fundraising skills.
Right, right. And the one-on-one can be very, very fruitful and fun. With my theater company, we instituted something called Board Buddies. So, and we're a resident ensemble. We are actor-driven, actor-run. So every actor has a board buddy, and you know, you go out for drinks, you go out for lunch. You tell them what's going on. They ask you what's going on. You ask them what do you want to see? Yeah, maybe we'll do that. You know, it's easy that way. And John, you're an actor. You'd probably be really good at it.
Well, you know, I should say too that I'd say that we have 4 actor managers, we're calling them, and each of us specializes in one thing. And one of our actor managers, his title, we have landed on the titles we initially came up with. They all need revision, I think. But his title is ambassador, and he happens to be very good at that exact kind of thing. And so, you know, he would be the person you might send to the cocktail party. You know, it's the strength of this.
Right. So do y'all have questions for each other?
Oh, I have a list.
Go.
I'm really curious how the length of what you've agreed to be part of the cohort, and how you would go about minting a new cohort member. I'm really curious about that. Is it, I mean, I assume everybody would want to be in for the whole cycle, but I'm curious.
I think that's sort of up in the air, to be completely honest. Like we're in the process of dreaming of what comes after us. We've started that process. And we don't know if it's going to be another, 4-person cohort. Maybe it'll be 2 people. We're not really sure. But what's really exciting about it is that all 3 of us will have a voice in what that looks like, as opposed to one person deciding what that looks like. I don't know. I think anyone who takes on the leadership after us would need to still have that Wilma spirit of like sort of dreaming past what we think is possible, which is like a hallmark of the work of that theater. And one of the reasons why I've wanted to work for this theater my entire career, and it's such an honor to be here, is that I get to be a part of like, what does the next step look like? What does the next chapter look like? And that's like super scary, right? Like there's something about that feels like so in completely unknowable. And I feel like the American theater is missing a little bit of a jolt of that. Like, what happens if the tightrope is really high and there's no net? What kind of art do you make? What comes out of that? And what I'm seeing coming out of our work is we learn a completely new skill set and make a movie. Or we give our ensemble X amount of dollars and we say, go make something that can be shared in a digital platform. And all of them make these incredible pieces of digital art that we then share with our audiences. What comes out of that is that we have, you know, changed and revised policies to make our space more equitable, to make our space more accessible, to really invest in anti-racism policies for the organization, because there's 4 people thinking about it instead of 1 person trying to suss out what that means. And so I'm hoping that that is now in the foundation of things. So moving forward, anything that grows up is coming out of that seed.
Yeah, and I think it's really moving away from the one charismatic leader model, so that hopefully once the 4 of us move on, however that happens, the theater can continue to function and have a strong identity and a strong mission, values, like that the ideas and the art and the work are the thing. It's not, I mean, the people are the thing, the artists are the thing, but that it's not so heavily tied to one person and their identity and their relationships. I think that will help with the burnout thing, that it can become something that can function and grow and change on its own, which I don't think is the way that I have ever thought about artistic directorship. That seems like and that's kind of seems like a pie in the sky dream to try to achieve. So I think we're trying to think about that.
Take notes.
What do you think is pie in the sky?
The theater functioning healthily without being tied to one charismatic leader.
Okay, I'm here to tell you it will work. It can work. Be prepared to bleed.
Oh yeah.
Family counseling might come into operation at some point. Seriously.
We did that.
Yeah, seriously, it's helpful. It's helpful because if you've got a room full of artists, a room full of actor artists, director artists, theater artists, they believe in their own vision. They believe in what they think will make the best theater. In my theater company, that evolved into almost a sense of taking turns. And ultimately, we did learn from each other. We are still learning from each other. Our art has our own art as individuals has grown because we have given over to somebody else's vision for a little while, you know? Do y'all have any more questions for each other? We are going to open it up to questions from all the people who are listening in, and there are tons of wonderful things in the chat that I haven't even had a chance to look at in depth, but yeah.
I'd love to talk about, or for John and Kelly to talk about this actor manager role in the organization. We have a resident company, and the way that company functions is in the process of shifting a bit. And I'm just curious if that is something that could be useful to us. I'm asking this really selfishly.
Well, I mean, it's all, fairly new, so we're trying it all out and finding out what it's all about. But so far in our rehearsals with our new company, I mean, there's a certain sense of some are more equal than others in a way, but what is true of all of the actor managers is all of us have been here for a number of years. We hold the institutional memory. We're available to suggest that maybe an idea that you have brought that sounds really great to you is one that we've tried 900 times and it just never quite works, or it might be, we can repeat things, we can explain things that have happened in the past. We also have a sense of what is a repetition, well, we just did that last year. We don't need to do exactly that same thing right away. So I think what we're trying to do, is have a sense of leadership without authority. Like, I don't want to tell anyone what to do, and I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. That's why I got into the arts to begin with. But we are trying to, there's some sense of leading by example as far as things. We have a very young company right now, so as far as things like professionalism and listening to each other and that sort of thing, there's a little bit of sense of leading by example, but also just the sense of, here's a somewhat authoritative take on a problem based on lots of experience, but it's never a fiat. It's never any of us telling you don't do this or do that. It's, here are some things to think about. Here are the equities to weigh as you try to figure out what it is you want to do. And then just the Actors Renaissance model is, I feel like my job is to help you realize the performance that you have in your heart. And so I will, ask you questions about it. I will perhaps try to steer you gently away from decisions that I think aren't going to pay off for you. But ultimately, it is letting people sink or swim on their own. That's sort of what we do. And like I say, we're figuring it out. It's tricky. I can see the temptations of authoritarianism in the theater. I sure can, because it sure would be easier sometimes to just say, okay, we're ending this conversation here. We're moving on to scene 2. This is what it's going to be, and we're done. I understand why people are like that in the theater, but I think that taking your time, opening things up to conversation, moving, kind of helping everyone arrive at something all at once produces a better result in the end.
Yeah. And each of them kind of functionally has a focus area and it's not that if you have for example, Chris Johnston is our actor manager for music. He is our music director. He does not point every song. No. But he is ultimately the more expert person in music, and so those questions kind of land over to him. He's
also playing Macbeth, which is no small.
Right. We have another actor manager, Zoe Spies, who is focusing on intimacy in the production part of the company, and so those questions go to her. Brandon Carter is the previously mentioned ambassador, and he's become a bit of like a morale officer or a guide for the new people who are doing this for the first time. And John, as we said before, he's like the flame keeper of language, which is a central tenet to what makes the American Shakespeare Center what it is. And then it also has the actor manager stuff, not so much while they're in rehearsal, but previously in the planning, has drifted over to the communication side as well. So the photo shoot for this season, they planned themselves and went through the proofs and were able to choose photos that they wanted to represent themselves as artists and the season in a way that they've never done before. Yeah. That usually marketing does that job. And we were able to do it collaboratively, where we could say, I know you love that picture, but it's not going to sell any tickets. How about this one? And be able to come to an agreement that serves both purposes.
Can I say also, just watching that process play out, especially for Zoe, who among the 4 of us, the woman among the 4 of us, finally was able to say, I don't want that picture to be the advertising. I don't want to be seen that way. I want to be seen that way. And I saw her feel so much more empowered, not just for the advertising, but actually for the play that we wound up producing, that she was in control of her own presentation. It was great.
Yeah.
So I think that, John and Kelly, I think that you're leading to an answer to a question that's in the chat, which is, so if you want leadership without authority, how do you get to a final decision if there is division?
Therapy.
Well, we've really committed, we committed at the beginning to a consensus model. And I committed to that model with a pretty high degree of skepticism, frankly. But so far, it's gone pretty well. I don't think we've put anything to a straight vote. I don't think it's come to that. I think the nature of, at least the artistic side of collaborative theater is, well, my dad is from Arkansas, right? Southern gentleman. And he used to always say, his advice to me was never die on a small cross. And so I think the idea is don't pick your battles. And if you're gonna, if you feel super strongly about something, or if you don't feel super strongly about something, give to the person who does feel super strongly about it, that you may have more to say in the next conversation where you feel super strongly about it. So far, that has worked. The consensus model has worked. One day we may be up for strict democracy. Then it's all about vote buying.
Yeah,
that kind of
fisticuffs.
stuff.
And I think there's also a little bit of reliance on who is expert on a given topic. That if it's, I'm not going to argue with you about a cut in a play. It's just not something I can have an opinion on it, but I'm not going to try to argue with you about that. And so there are some people with greater authority over certain areas, or not even authority, but expertise.
And we're trying across the company to let the people who know what they're doing do what they do. I know nothing about marketing, so we hire good marketing people and let them do their jobs.
So long as your face doesn't look weird.
As long as I don't look weird.
Another question in the chat is, are there any specific models that you researched or can recommend?
Yeah, I don't have them off the top of my head, but I can, if there's a place to drop that kind of information from TCG, I can send some of the research that I did, or that a lot of people did. Yeah. I think I would love to see more of what the actor manager model was back then, kind of research, because I think there's still stuff to learn from it.
You can put that information in the Padlet.
Padlet, thank you.
I will say that for my theater company, we are in the midst of, well, I'm going to pass it on because I haven't quite formulated my thought. So decision-making, final decisions, how's that working for you all, Morgan and James? Final say.
Morgan, you want to go?
It's funny. It's not something like John was just saying that they committed to consensus. We did not make any sort of commitment at the beginning of our time together, but we are for people who like to listen to each other. Sometimes we do not reach consensus, and then things don't happen. Nothing happens, and that's not great either. Yeah. So it's slow. Yeah. So things get stalled or I think that's, and we keep talking and we keep talking and talking. And then finally we agree on something and then it happens. James, what do you think?
I would agree with that. And I also think, I try to, in my own practice in this experiment, whether we're in a meeting or we're having, a disagreement about something and it's all of us, I try to say like, okay, is my voice missing right now? Is something being said in this space that I need to like respond to or that I violently disagree with? And most of the time it's not. So like, not to say that I don't speak, but like I try to like meter how much I am slowing down the process. And then I also, try to defer to lead AD whenever I can, because they, one, have more information than I have because they're on the ground a lot more than I am. We're on, sort of different degrees of presence in this cohort. So Morgan is I think, you're at 20%, I'm at 40% because it's my ramp up year. I'm leading to my lead year. Yuri is full time, so he's there all the time. And Blanca is back to 20%. So the amount of information that the lead AD has, there are many times where I have to say, wait, okay, help me understand that, so that I can be productive in this conversation. And so I do need to like lean on that knowledge. But then the flip side of that is then I can go, well, have you considered this? Is this a way that you've thought about this thing that you're struggling with? And then then I can help that lead AD make a decision that maybe doesn't come from consensus, but does come from a great deal of research and development in the room of us thinking about what is best for the organization at any given moment. So it's not quite consensus. And I helped run a playwright producing collective in Philly called Orbiter 3 for 4 years. Shout out to Orbiter 3 if anybody is in the room that knows about us. And we had an implosion model. We knew that we were only going to exist for 4 years. We were going to be hot and heavy for 4 years and then go away. And every decision we made was by consensus. And it was excruciating. But the art was better. The treatment of the artist was better. We were happier ultimately because we knew that we had all made these decisions together as a collective. And that was an experiment that we could sort of take that risk on because we knew that there was a finite time. But I am really interested in how consensus, in whatever degree, deepens the art, deepens the process, because it's not just one person prescribing what a thing should be.
James, there's a question for you in the chat that got some enthusiasm. Oh, you're muted, Laurie.
Sorry, there's a burning question for you in the chat, James.
Evie open and talking about how shared leadership works. Yeah. It is not easy, but it is also not difficult. And I always feel respected and listened to in those spaces. I don't feel like I have to make room for myself. In fact, I probably take up more space than I probably should sometimes. But the issues of predominantly white institutions and the sort of white supremacy that's sort of structurally embedded inside of those institutions is that it's the water. It's like it's in everything. It's in how the seats are set up. It's in what the color of the carpet is. It's actually really embedded in every choice in the organization. And so I keep running into it with this knowledge of like, I have to tease that out, or I have to ask a question about that, because not because someone is actively trying to maintain these systems, it's just there. It's just like so prevalent. So I'm always trying to raise the flag on that. And I'm not alone. Our staff is more diverse than the cohort, I would say. And so, and over the year, they've become more and more engaged and active in working groups, making decisions, helping us change policy, helping us reevaluate what we want to be. We're in this process right now of creating values for the organization, because in many ways, we're at a beginning point. I don't know how much of us really want to confront the fact that this coming back from a year away, it's like starting over. And we have a real great opportunity in this moment to decide how we want to invite people back into the space, who can walk into the space and feel utterly capable to be who they are, their fullest self in the space. And we have the opportunity to make those choices right now and to sort of make that happen, to manifest that. So I would say it's work, but it's like the work that I get excited by. It's the work I like to do. Is that Joey? Hey, Joey. Right on. Just somebody in the chat I know.
I'm going to quickly address a question of models. In the chat, somebody brought up a question regarding models. Network of ensemble theaters. There are a lot of theaters across the nation that have been making collective theater for a long time. Check them out. Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. We're in our 43rd season. We have never had a single artistic director. It's always been run by the ensemble. And we are deeply connected with each other and deeply connected with our community. That's partly because of where we are. We also turn for models to the Quakers. Talk about consensus. We are in Quaker country, and we learn from the folks around us. Let's see, I think it's time that we can open this up to questions from all the folks out there who are listening in. Erin, are you able to help us with that?
I certainly can. If people will just, if anyone has a question, would like to use the raise hand function on Zoom, you can access that at the bottom of your screen. or you can put hand in the chat and I will do my best to keep track.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to vocalize. Devin says under reactions at the bottom of your screen is where the raise hand function is. Thanks, Devin. I do see one question in the chat from Cynthia. It says, Kelly, can you say more about the staff reorganization you envision, especially for administrative positions?
Yes, I wish I had a graphic to show you because it's a little easier to see graphically. Our aim is to have less separation between artistic and administrative and to bring them closer together. It's basically the chart, if I'm remembering it correctly, has a mission in the center. It has then 4 little arms going out. One of them is for operations, and that's finance, HR, facilities, that sort of stuff. Then there is engagement, which is a combined marketing and development team, which I've wanted to do for years and got to do because of COVID, is combined marketing and development because people are not ticket buyers or donors, they're one person. So the entire communication staff is under engagement. Then it has a programming, which is our combined kind of the planning side of the artistic team with the education department together. And then there's production, which is all of the people that are involved with making the plays actually happen. And then the idea is that throughout the year, there is crossover among the different departments. So for season planning, even though the responsibility for planning that meeting and guiding those conversations lives within the programming department, the actor manager core, which lives over in production, would be heavily involved in those conversations, as would people who focus on educational programming and marketing, because you have to have all of those pieces to plan a season. We had a rather unwieldy organizational chart before this that had a very complicated way of getting information from each other. And as a workaround, we've kind of been creating these temporary task forces to deal with different projects that we have going on. And so I think what we're going to do is codify those project teams and make those actually functional and identify, as you asked, like who the leader is of each of those projects rather than of a given department. That's been, I think, the hardest thing to get our board out of the idea of that. Even that kind of center core of people that come together to represent each of the different areas, those people aren't necessarily leaders of those departments. They're just representing the collective voice of those departments. And I think that's been a little bit hard for our board to wrap their heads around, but there's still more conversations to have in the next couple of weeks to finalize all of this, but that's kind of where we're heading. But yeah, there is some soft hierarchy within those groups as necessary. You know, and it's more about lines of communication rather than lines of authority. You know, you still want to have some level of brand management. So you do want all of your different kinds of communications going through a central person so that you're making sure that you're organized, but it doesn't mean that person necessarily has authority over the rest of the people in that group, if that makes sense.
There's another question in the chat regarding hearing more about salary disparities and transparency among the leadership collectives and between the collectives and staff members and actors.
Is that a question for us? So I can answer that from our perspective. We brought, as we were reorganizing, we went through a period of furlough at the beginning of the year, and people started trickling back into full-time work sometime around March. And as people were coming back, we brought salaries up to get them closer to have less disparity across the organization on the administrative side. And I think he did the same thing as actors. We used to have like a fairly complicated tiered system of actor salaries, and the actor managers are paid more than the rest of the actors in the company. But now all of the actors are at the same level, and it's higher than the lowest level was before.
That I think
that's
is
right.
right. Yeah. We also are in the position right now of not having to contend with actors' equity. Once we, in the next year or two, we are hoping, to sort of reestablish a connection with actors' equity that was severed by pandemic. And so we'll have to revisit this question then, that.
But I think the intention is to have less, and there's still work to be done even on the admin side, but what we've been talking about this whole time is what is actually a sustainable model? What does it actually cost to do this work in a way that you don't have one class of actors making so much more than others? I've worked for theaters where the difference between an equity actor and a non-equity actor is not livable, which I don't think has been the case here. It's always been a smaller gap, but there's still a gap. The goal is to shrink that gap, and that's work we've already started and will continue to do.
Great. I have a question for all of you. Has this restructuring necessitated a rewriting of your mission? And if so, has that been an exciting or a daunting process?
Not yet.
I suspect it's in our future for sure. And it isn't just pandemic restructuring. It's a lot has happened in this world in the last couple of years, and we are pretty dedicated to dealing with that head on. And the mission statement is somewhere on that road. I'm not sure quite where, but it's on that road.
I think you're right. I think the company has a really good, clear core identity, and the things that we value, certainly in production, are super clear. And I think it's been easy to rely on those things. Like the ensemble is part of who we are and has always been. And so I think, but the actual language that is the mission, I think will probably need a look.
Yeah, at the Wilma, where we began a process in the cohort of writing an artistic statement, which would eventually be from the four of us. But then in that process realized, actually coming out of our anti-racist work that we were doing as an entire institution, realized we had to work on our values first before we could write this artistic statement, which will probably change the mission. So it's a domino effect. But so we're focusing on the values right now as a whole institution. We have this whole plan laid out for how we're going to determine them together. And we're just at the beginning of that process.
I think we've got about 10 minutes left. So if there are other questions from out there in the field, or if you all have questions for each other, we've got some time.
Taking a look at a few things that may or may not have been missed from earlier in the chat. So forgive me if I'm going to read this out and let me know if you feel like you addressed this already or if you'd like to answer. So Wilma, do you choose work for your resident company? Do you use actors outside of the resident company? And how much of the work you choose is tied to the expertise of the resident company? Does the resident company change? If so, how often? That's many questions all in a row. I realize I'll drop that all in the chat so you can take a look.
I would say we absolutely pick plays that this company can do. And the company is interesting because it's, when it started, it was a group of artists that were in their mid-20s to their mid-30s, and that has shifted now. So they're all slightly older. And then, we've added company members here and there. There have been company members to leave. We just recently, right before the pandemic, added 2 company members, Suli Holem and Brendan Pierce, to the company. Let me see. Do we choose work for the company? Yes. Do you use outside actors? Yes, we often do have to go outside and use outside actors. For example, in Fat Ham, about half of the cast was company and the other half was outside of the company, just because of the specifics we needed for the play. But oftentimes the entire ensemble in a play are company members. how much of the work you choose is tied to the expertise of the company. All of it? Morgan, what do you think? I think all of it.
Yeah, I think if we come across a play that we like, but it doesn't have any roles for the company, that's like a pretty large deterrent. We'll probably put that aside because it does feel like a priority to feature the company and what we're choosing.
And they've been training in these methods that Blanca has pulled together for a very long time. So the shorthand with that company is like this big in terms of like how they work, how they speak to each other, that sort of telepathy that happens when you're with people so much. Our company meets every Monday and trains together. Or they, there is a meeting of the company every Monday. They don't always come. And also the thing I wanted to say, because there was a question about disparity in pay. We just put our company on salary, which is not like a full salary, but they are paid to be a part of the company and to like interact with the needs of the organization as a whole. And that's new. I think that's something we implemented during the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see how that functions. And this is above and beyond what they make if they're in a production and what we're required to pay them through equity and LORD. So on top of that, they get a small salary from us each year for being a part of the company.
Thank you. And I think we've got another one that I think you've all addressed a little bit, but this is a kind of more specific question. I'm going to drop it here in the chat. It makes total sense that so much is TBD because this is an evolving process. Is there a central value or sort of North Star that you all return to as you work together to figure out these new structures?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm an actor at heart. Like, it's really listening is the main thing. That's what I hope that we achieve in all of our meetings as well as in all of our rehearsals. That is sort of the North Star of all of the work that I try to do. And I think and I mean that in a sort of person-to-person sense, but also speaking as a white, straight, cis person, like that is my job as a human being right now. And I think that we all are committed to that aspect of cohabitating with the planet.
I return to ensemble a lot as a touchstone. And I love, one of the great things about Rep and getting to watch Rep for the past few years is that every show you get to see a different side of our different actors, and you get to see, the hero today is the clown tomorrow. And it reframes how you think about your colleagues, even on the admin side, that the grant writer today could be the customer service agent tomorrow. Or it's not a good example, but there's the ensemble means that you have to look at, it's constantly rotating. You have to look at the different things that we all have to offer and put everybody to their best, highest purpose. And so that's what I think about, which requires listening. Yeah.
How about you, Wilma folks? What's your North Star?
I would say curiosity, experimentation, and connection. And I think that encapsulates all of the things that we do really well. So like connection is about audience, but it's also about the people you're on stage with. Like, there's the horizontal relationship on stage of what are we doing? And then there's this vertical relationship between what we're doing and what y'all watching. And then there's this other horizontal relationship between y'all watching us do what we do and having feelings about it that are singular, but are put together with other people. So that's really important, that we are constantly trying to keep that alive and keep that exciting and keep that fresh. And you do that through experimentation, which requires failure, which means you're going to get things wrong, which means that you're going to do a play that people aren't going to like. And that's okay. You're going to do a production that doesn't succeed the way you want it to succeed and doesn't reach ticket goals. But maybe the curiosity that you were exploring in that production is going to lead to something that's going to be utterly remarkable a season later. or the next show. So all of those things sort of working in concert, not forgetting who we are together making this art, who's watching that art, how those things are in conversation with each other, and how that feeds our experimentation and our curiosity. Morgan.
I mean, what you said. I guess the way I've been thinking about it is like that the work is the North Star, and the way the people making the work, like the way that the working environment feels for them, and how we take care of them, and how the policies protect them, and how the staff works, like all of those things feed into the work. And so that's the thing that's bringing us all together. That's why we're here. But so just trying to keep that as the North Star, and all of this other stuff that we're doing is like moving towards that.
Great. I'm just going to say how gratifying it is for me as an ensemble theater artist working in a collective for 43 years now. We were told at the beginning, ensembles don't last. Look at us. Look at all of you. We're here to testify. We last. And you know, we make the best theater because we honor the nature of our art form. And I think we have to bring this to a close, but let us thank our incredible ASL interpreters. So amazing. So incredible. And thank you, TCG, for helping us connect with each other.